Kyiv, a Russian attack severely damaged a maternity hospital in the besieged port city of Mariupol, Ukraine said Wednesday, as citizens, trying to escape shelling on the outskirts of Kyiv, streamed toward the capital amid warnings from the West that Moscow's invasion is about to take a more brutal and indiscriminate turn. President Volodymyr Zelensky wrote on Twitter that there were people, children under the wreckage of the hospital and called the strike an atrocity. Authorities said they were trying to establish how many people had been killed or wounded. Video shared by Zelensky showed cheerfully painted hallways strewn with twisted metal and room after room with blown-out windows. Floors were covered in wreckage. Outside, mangled cars burned, in a video provided by the Mariupol City Council, with heavy damage to at least 3 two-story buildings. Much of the front of one building had been ripped away. The council said the damage was colossal. There are few things more depraved than targeting the vulnerable and defenseless, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson tweeted, adding that Russian President Vladimir Putin will be held to account for his terrible crimes. Authorities, meanwhile, announced new ceasefires Wednesday morning to allow thousands of civilians to escape from towns around Kyiv as well as the southern cities of Mariupol, Enerhodar and Volnovakha, Izium in the east and Sumy in the northeast. Previous attempts to establish safe evacuation corridors largely failed because of what the Ukrainians said were Russian attacks. But Putin, in a telephone call with Germany's chancellor, accused militant Ukrainian nationalists of hampering the evacuations. It was not immediately clear whether anyone was able to leave other cities on Wednesday, but people streamed out of Kyiv's suburbs, many headed for the city center, even as explosions were heard in the capital and air raid sirens sounded repeatedly. From there, the evacuees planned to board trains bound for western Ukrainian regions not under attack. Civilians leaving the Kyiv suburb of Irpin were forced to make their way across the slippery wooden planks of a makeshift bridge, because the Ukrainians blew up the concrete span to Kyiv days ago to slow the Russian advance. With sporadic gunfire echoing behind them, firefighters dragged an elderly man to safety in a wheelbarrow, a child gripped the hand of a helping soldier, and a woman inched her way along cradling a fluffy cat inside her winter coat. They trudged past a crashed van with the words "Our Ukraine's" written in the dust coating its windows. "We have a short window of time at the moment," said Yevhen Nishchik, a member of Ukraine's territorial defense forces. "Even if there is a ceasefire right now, there is a high risk of shells falling at any moment." In Mariupol, local authorities hurried to bury the dead in a Massachusetts grave. City workers dug a trench some 25 yards long at one of the city's old cemeteries and made the sign of the cross as they pushed bodies wrapped in carpets or bags over the edge. Nationwide, thousands are thought to have been killed, both civilians and soldiers, in the 2 weeks of fighting since Putin's forces invaded. The Union estimates more than 2 million people have fled the country, the biggest exodus of refugees in Europe since the end of World War I. The fighting knocked out power to the decommissioned Chernobyl nuclear plant, raising fears about the spent fuel that is stored at the site and must be kept cool. But the UN Nuclear Watchdog Agency said it saw no critical impact on safety from the loss of power. The crisis is likely to get worse as Moscow's forces step up their bombardment of cities in response to what appear to be stronger Ukrainian resistance and heavier Russian losses than anticipated. Echoing the director of the CIA, British Defense Secretary said Russia's assault will get more brutal and more indiscriminate as Putin tries to regain momentum. Britain's defense ministry said fighting continued northwest of Kyiv. The cities of Kharkiv, Chernihiv, Sumy and Mariupol were being heavily shelled and remained encircled by Russian forces. Russian forces are placing military equipment on farms and amid residential buildings in the northern city of Chernihiv, Ukraine's military said. In the south, Russians in civilian clothes are advancing on the city of Mykolaiv, a Black Sea shipbuilding center of 500,000 people, it said. The Ukrainian military, meanwhile, is building up defenses in cities in the north, south and east, and forces around Kyiv are holding the lines against the Russian offensive, authorities said. In Irpin, a town of, police officers and soldiers helped elderly residents from their homes. One man was hoisted out of a damaged structure on a makeshift stretcher, while another was pushed toward Kyiv in a shopping cart. Fleeing residents said they had been without power and water for the past 4 days. Regional administration head Oleksiy Kuleba said the crisis for civilians is deepening in and around Kyiv, with the situation particularly dire in the suburbs. Russia is artificially creating a humanitarian crisis in the Kyiv region, frustrating the evacuation of people and continuing shelling and bombing small communities, he said. The situation is even worse in Mariupol, a strategic city of people on the Sea of Azov that has been encircled by Russian forces for the past week. Efforts to evacuate residents and deliver badly needed food, water and medicine failed Tuesday because of what the Ukrainians said were continued Russian attacks. The city took advantage of a lull in the shelling Wednesday to hurriedly bury 70 people. Some were soldiers, but most were civilians. The work was conducted efficiently and without ceremony. No mourners were present, no families to say their goodbyes. One woman stood at the gates of the cemetery to ask whether her mother was among those being buried. "I block test why?"